That's my mother and my father, William and Nellie, on their wedding day. Do you think that? This is Bernice.
That's
she is
Bernice,
the
you
second
say again,
child
when she
in
was a
the
baby?
family.
Okay.
The first was
Probably
a boy,
4 or 5 years old.
and she's
Yeah.
the second one.
Okay.
I think that's it.
This is my oldest sister, and her name's Bernice May, and her husband Bill Clark on their wedding day. That's my oldest sister, Bernice. What else are you? This is Bernice. She was married to Bill Clark. She had one little boy, and she was buried on his first birthday. Bill eventually married, and he was raised by a stepmother that was very good to him. She took him to Zanesville, Ohio, and he was a police officer at Zanesville until he retired. He's still living there. That's Bernice. That's Cyrilla. Yeah, that's Vivian. She was about 2 there. And that's still Vivian. Yeah, about the same time. That's my dad and Vivian. These were all in Wyoming. That's Bernice and Vivian.
Bernice and Vivian.
Yeah.
Bernice again.
Yeah.
Archie Alexander outside of Krell in Wyoming. Dee standing out of alongside a log cabin in Wyoming. James Alexander with a fine duck he's shot here. James riding an old cow. June Alexander. June holding up a duck, getting ready to have dinner.
Did you get those?
Jeanette standing on the plains in Wyoming. James Alexander at a young age standing in Wyoming. And Jeanette. Arilla at Big Piney, Wyoming. Who are you in this picture?
Oh, I was probably about 12, 13, somewhere around in there.
Archie at 19 years old. Now who are they again?
Bernice and Archie and Arilla and Dee.
Their mother died.
7 years old, and my 2 younger sisters and my younger brother and I went to Cheyenne to the orphanage.
How long were you in the orphanage then?
I think close to a year, and eventually June and James ended up there too, and then we
I went to the Ray family, and so did June and James and Belden. They all went with some of the Rays. And then eventually I went back to Wyoming to live.
You had moved to Montana first now, right?
Oh, yes.
The Ray family all moved to Montana.
Yeah, the Ray family all went from Wyoming to Montana. I went with them, so did my brothers. And then eventually we all went back to Wyoming. Not the Rays, but just us kids. And then I was there for several months, and Donald wanted me to come back, and I came back, and we were married. So, what else?
Do you remember what year that was? 1937 or?
37, January 26, 19.
The family was hailed out for several years in a row. They had crop failure in Wyoming, so they migrated to Fishtail, Montana. And here's my dad checking the cattle out at Fishtail, Montana. My dad was kicked in the face by a horse, narrowly missing his eye. He too had a schoolmarm for a girlfriend. This gal looks as though she would have been a little bit stern in the classroom. I'm riding an old cow in Montana and enjoying every minute of it. My Uncle Paul in the 1950s. My grandparents' house in Montana, where they moved after Wyoming. My Uncle Charlie and his granddaughter and his dog Queenie. Myself, my sister Carol, and my cousin Margie, all in front of the house in Montana sometime in the 1940s. My Grandpa Ray holding my sister Carol and myself in front of his house in Montana. My Grandpa Ray and my Grandma Ray holding my sister Carol in about 1940. My dad, Ed Larson, and my sister Carol as they're cutting some grain. My sister and myself doing little fishing off the bridge right in front of our cabin where we lived in the 1940s in Montana. One of my things to do was to get a hold of a pig's tail and try to pull the curl out of it. My Uncle Paul and his wife Glenna. Myself all decked out in my railroad coveralls, and I'm waiting to go on a train ride. My Grandpa and Grandma Ray in Virginia, in Idaho. They've just picked some nice peaches. Somebody's going to be busy canning now. My Grandpa Ray, Betty Jane, and Virginia. When I was growing up, we kept in touch with all the rest of the family. We went to visit them, and they came to visit us. That was just my Uncle Jim Ray from Texas roping me. And there's my grandma and the rest of the family out there, Bess. And there's Jim roping a horse out in our corral. They're keeping up on the old skills that they learned while they were children. And there's my dad roping his favorite white horse. We go on a trip to western Idaho to see my Uncle Charlie Ray and his family. The girl there is Fay Ann, and Layla's coming up behind. My sister Carol, Fay Ann, and Norman. My dad leading Florence Ray on a horse and Charlie trotting by. Florence is doing a few exercises there. My Uncle Earl is bucking some hay with his team of horses as we're putting up hay. May is on the stack, stacking the hay. We go by to see the Alexander side of the family. June and James have a logging operation there, and Frank James is helping with it too. There's Frank helping with a big two-man chainsaw, sawing off the end of a log. They put these logs on a deck, and then they'll roll them up to the sawmill and run them through the mill. Arilla and May are standing by, and Frank is moving around in the background. There's Arilla and Frank by a big old stump. Frank's taking a little break. The sawmill has the old carriage you ride, the old double mill with the carriage. James Alexander is riding the carriage, sawing the lumber. Some of the Alexander children, the one we recognize here is a little dark-haired one. That's Cheryl, and that must have been Jessie that came by and made the scene in front of the camera. Eleanor and Bernice. Eleanor's James Alexander's wife, and Bernice is Belden Alexander's wife, with their children there. And now Rilla gets in there. There's Jessie, the little white-headed one. Belden and June are riding a tricycle. Belden and May are catching some fish. This is May's first fish. She's really proud of it. We sure had a nice fish fry. I'll never forget that fish fry. We walk up a trail up into the mountains where the fishing is good. Up Cedar Creek and up 2 Mile Creek as well. Belden, Bernice, and Joy are posed on the porch here. Next, back at the ranch, Dee Alexander and his family come to visit us. The little guy there is Tommy and Sissy Alexander, and Billy was along as well, and little Butch is there as well. There's little Butch and Jessie, that's Dee's wife. Out in front of our corrals there on the ranch in Montana. Sissy runs by the camera while Dee holds little Butch. May is in an apple tree picking some apples. Betty Jane holds her first child, Jack, out in our yard there at Fishtail, Montana.
The headlines on the paper read, James Alexander finds his sister. His sister, Jeanette, on the left. James is next. June, Arilla, and my mom. This was taken in Superior, Montana, when they finally got together after all these years.
And finally, I've made it as far west as I can get, so I'm going to go a little farther west on this fishing boat out off the coast of Oregon. We made trips at sea and anchored out there and spent 10 days at a time.